Hello. Give me a second. Yeah. Okay. Hi. Oh. Fuck. Okay. I can barely see this monitor. I'm gonna increase the contrast. There you go. I can start see something. Keep my phone away. Okay, so let me just go to where I was. Right. Okay, so what we want to do now is, so I've finished. Um, now, so I've finished. The last thing I did was this. I think. Let me just. Check my timeline. There we go. So the last. So I'm going to give this commit. Completed functionality for the updated card pointing to complete, including updating the web page. Okay, cool. So I finished that last. So now what I want to do is I want to add some simple functionality for. I want to add some simple functionality so that let's say like like if I want to make this like 5, right, and then instead of clicking save, I want it so that if I click enter, it's the same as doing the save button. So I'm clicking enter right now and that's not working. So let's say I click save. So I'm not sure how to do that, but I think yeah. So it might be just running this whole thing. I want to run this whole thing when I click enter. Just asking Claude how to. I don't remember how to do it. So for each link, we'll make all this a function actually. So Claude gave me this. I've been put in a Claude and I'm trying to understand how this works. So if I do slash dot and then start slash. This is what Claude gave me. For each link, save. We run this function. We make this function called save quantity. Right. So let me just. I think this can just be function save quantity. And so make this just does this, yeah. Right, and then the product ID is the link dataset as it here. The container is the document sector product ID. The container class is remove this editing quantity. Quantity input value. Update quantity, product ID, and new quantity, which we've done here. And then we do container, which is this. The query selector dot quantity label dot inner HTML is equal to new quantity. Let's format this a little differently. You want to update the cart quantity. So I want to write some documentation for this. So I believe it was. So this is the doc string. And this. This updates the displayed quantity and the page. Right, so I think Claude's really good at writing docs. So okay, so this is the docs that Claude wrote, and I just like briefly told you what the function does. I think that should do it. if I remove this? Just like wondering out of curiosity. Yeah, so that doesn't make a difference. Okay. Right, so then I update the cart quantity on the page, and then link.add event is now click save quantity, const quantity input equals document dot query select js class item dot quantity input. Dataset. On key down, it gives me the event. If event key is equal to input, say you run this whole function, which is right. So I want to give a doc string for this. So the moment we get enter, we run this whole thing. So over here we add an event list now. If the event is equal to 94. So this should work. This, like, I was just trying to figure out how this works, but this should work more or less. So if I just load this web page, if it decides to load, there we go. So like if I wanna like do 4 and click enter, that should work. Like, let's say I wanna make it 2. Yeah. I was just trying to understand the logic. So basically, it's made this into a function. So we already added doc string here. So let me just try making the doc string so that I at least have like some understanding of how it works. So if I do /star star, it gives me, let's say saves the new quantity for a product in the cart and updates the UI. That's it. So it's giving me this, and at requires update quantity, and it also requires update card quantity. I need to change these names, by the way, they're really bad. So this is a function. Oops. This is a function to update the quantity and card data, and this is a function. I keep misspelling function to update the quantity Alright, so now let's have this. Well, this I just copied from ChatGPT. Let's see. Let's go back. But this should look good. Yeah, no, I'm just gonna close this stock string. Yep, okay, that works. Let me just let this. This is fine. I'm gonna. This. Yeah, this is what I don't need now. So then just like go and get this and say add a functionality. Update quantity function using enter okay. What are the less than 15 external libraries? MVC, which I don't know what MVC is, and finishing the checkout page.
In this lesson, we're going to learn about external libraries, and we're going to finish the checkout page in our final project. An external library is basically just code that is outside of our project. So far, we've only been using code that is inside our project, like these files. Well, a lot of developers write JavaScript code and then put their code on the internet, and we can actually load their code from the
Each just save quantity link. This is, if I inspect this, I think I'm gonna be able to get some update. So if I click update, and then this is the JS save quantity link, and this is the quantity input. Yeah, this is called quantity input.
internet into our project and use it. We call this code an external library because it's code that is outside of our project. Let's do an example and load our first external library. We're going to go to the video description and we're going to click this link. For the Hello external library. For the Hello for the Hello external library. And it will open up a page that contains JavaScript code. So I actually wrote this code myself. And you'll notice that this is just normal JavaScript code. We create a function called hello, and it just console.logs hello. So this is called an external library. It's code that is outside of our project. So the cool thing is, we can actually load this code from the internet into our project. So let's give that a try. We're going to go to our project, and we're going to open checkout.html. And we're going to scroll to the bottom, and above the script tag, we're going to add another script tag to load some code. So script, and we'll give it a source attribute. And then in here, instead of using a file path like we've done before, we're going to give this a URL of a website that contains JavaScript code. So if we go back to our browser, and here, the URL of this page is up here. So we're just going to copy this, right-click copy, and then paste it into our code. Right-click and paste. So now, the computer will get all the JavaScript code from this URL, or from this page. So it's going to get all the code from this page and load it into our project like normal code. So let's save, and let's give this a try. So this code creates a function called hello. So let's try running this hello function in our project. We'll go to checkout.js, and then scroll to the top, and then here, let's just run the function hello. So hello and brackets, and save. Now if we go back to our project, go to the checkout page, and check the console, right-click, inspect, and the console, you'll see that it displayed the message hello. So that's how an external library works. It's just code that is outside of our project. And we can load this code using a script tag like this. We just give it the URL of where this code is located. So there's two things you might be wondering about. How come we put the script tag at the top? So generally, we load external libraries first, and then we can use the library in our own code below. And the second thing is, how do you put code on the internet like this? To learn this, you can check out my video on how to put a website on the internet. It'll show you how to put any file like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript files onto a website like this. Next, let's talk about why we use external libraries. External libraries let us share code. Instead of writing all the code ourselves, we can use code that other people wrote, and this helps us save time and avoid duplicating work. Right now, we're loading a very simple library, so let's load a more complex library to show how we can save a lot of time and work. Let's go back to our project and go to the checkout page. Here, we have a section for choosing a delivery option for this product. And you notice that each option has a date. So this is the date that the product should be delivered by. So the way this works is that the cheapest option here takes 7 days to deliver. The $4.99 option takes 3 days to deliver, and the $9.99 option takes 1 day to deliver. So to get these dates here, we need to do 3 things. First, we need to somehow get today's date in our JavaScript. Number 2, we need to do calculations with the date, such as add 7 days or add 3 days. And number 3, we need to display the date in an easy-to-read format like this. Now, we could try to figure out how to do this ourselves by writing our own code, but this is going to be a lot of work. Instead, we can use an external library to help us work with dates. So in this project, we're going to use an external library called day.js. This is a popular library that helps us work with dates. So first, let's load day.js into our project. We're going to go to the video description, and we'll click this link for the day.js external library. And when the page opens, you'll see a bunch of random code here. Now you might think that this is some special code, but this is actually just regular JavaScript code that has been compressed. So basically all the extra spaces have been removed and the variable names have been shortened to 1 letter. We compress JavaScript code like this because we need to load this code from the internet into our project. By compressing it, it makes this code smaller, so it will load into our project faster. So this compression process is called minification, or we minify the code. Okay, so this is the code for the external library day.js. Now let's load this code into our project. We'll go back to our code, and then go to checkout.html, and then here we're going to add another script tag, ~script, and the source attribute. And then here, we're going to give it the URL of the code we want to load. So let's go back to the code for day.js, and then up here, we're going to right-click and copy this URL. And then inside our code, in the source attribute, we're going to right-click and paste the URL, and save. So again, this will take all the code that's located on this page, and then load it into our project. Now let's give it a try. The day.js external library creates a function called day.js. So we'll go to checkout.js, and then at the top, we're going to run the day.js function and brackets. Now make sure this is all lowercase, because that's the name that the library used. So now let's actually console.log the result of this function. Console.log, and save. And we'll go back to our project. In the checkout page, we're going to check our console. And you'll see that the day.js function gives us an object. And this object represents the current date and time. So we know that day.js is working. And that's it. We successfully loaded the day.js external library into our project. Now let's learn how to use day.js. External libraries usually have a documentation page that shows us how to use the library. We can find the documentation page by searching on Google the library name, like day.js, and then documentation. Or we can ask an AI tool how to use the library. To make things easier in this video, I'm going to show you the features that we need, and you can go through the documentation later if you want. So earlier, we said we needed to do 3 things with the date. First, we want to get today's date. Number 2, we want to do calculations with the date. And number 3, we want to display the date in an easy-to-read format. day.js helps us do all of these things. So first, let's use day.js to get today's date. According to the documentation, to get the current date and time, we can just use the day.js function, like this. So if we go back to our code, that's what we have here. We call day.js, and it gives us an object that represents the current date and time. The second thing we need to do is to do calculations with the date. So for the delivery options here, we need to calculate today's date plus 7 days, or today's date plus 3 days. So again, the day.js library can help us do this. So let's go back to our console, and look at the object that we get back from day.js. So this object represents today's date and time. And this object also has a method called add, which adds a certain amount of time to this date. So this is what we need for the project, to calculate these dates here. Let's go to our code. And first, let's save this result in a variable. So we're going to remove this and create a variable const today equals day.js. And then down here, we're going to use the add method. So we'll type today.add and brackets. Now the add method takes two parameters. The first one is the number of time that we want to add. So if we want to add 7 days, we're going to type 7. And then the second parameter is the length of time that we want to add. So if we want to add 7 days, we're going to give it a string days. So this will add 7 days to today's date. So let's save this result in a variable. Const delivery date equals this result, and we'll console.log it to make sure it's working correctly. Console.log the delivery date and save. Now if we go back to our project and open the console, it will give us an object that represents 7 days after today, or 7 days after when you're watching this video. So that's how we use JJS to do calculations with the date. It gives us a method. That represents 7 days after today, or 7 days after when you're watching this video. So that's how we use JJS to do calculations with the date. It gives us methods like add to add a certain amount of time to the date. Finally, we're going to use JJS to display this date in an easy to read format like this. So according to the documentation, this date object has another method called .format, which will display the date in an easy to read format. So let's go back to our code, and we'll remove the console.log, and we'll type delivery date dot format. And then inside these brackets, we're going to give this method a string. So this string tells JJS what kind of format we want for the date. So in the documentation, it has a table showing us some special characters we can put into this string. For example, if we want to show the day of the week, like Monday or Tuesday, we can type 4 Ds into the string. And this will give us a string where this text is replaced by the actual day of the week. If we want to add a comma and a space to this format, we can just add a comma and space, and this will show up directly in the result. Now let's say that after this, we want to show the month. According to the documentation, to show the month, we can type 4 capital M's, and it will replace this with the month. And finally, we'll type a space, and according to the documentation, if we want to insert the day of the month into the string, we can type a capital D. So this method takes this date and converts it into a string with this format. So now let's console.log this to see what it looks like. We'll console.log and brackets and save, and then go into our project and open the console. And now you should see the date 7 days after today, but displayed in an easy to read format. So that's how we use the JJS external library to help us work with dates. And as you can see, it saves us a lot of time and work. We don't have to figure out how to work with dates ourselves. We can just use someone else's code to solve this problem. So a best practice in programming is, when we need to do something complicated, try to find an external library first, before writing the code ourselves. To find external libraries, we can search in Google, JavaScript, and then what kind of library we're looking for, like date library. We can also use an AI tool to help us find external libraries. Next, we're going to learn how to use external libraries and JavaScript modules together. Right now, if we look at our code and go to checkout.html, we're loading these libraries using script tags. The problem with script tags is that it runs this code directly on the page, and this might cause naming conflicts. For example, the hello library creates a function called hello. So if something else is called hello in any of our other code, it might cause a naming conflict. A better way to load external libraries is to use JavaScript modules, because a module will contain this code inside a file, and any variables that are created inside the file will not conflict with anything outside of the file. To use external libraries and JavaScript modules together, we're going to use a special version of the library called an ESM version. ESM stands for ECMAScript modules. ECMAScript is just another name for JavaScript. So the ESM version of a library is just a version that works with JavaScript modules. So let's do an example. We're going to go to the video description, and we're going to open the ESM hello.js. So you can see that it's the exact same code as before. We're creating a function called hello, except this time I just added the word export in front of function. So this turns the library into an ESM version, and now it will work with JavaScript module.
Oh, ah. Okay.
Modules. So let's use the ESM version in our code. We're going to go back to our code, and we're not going to use script tags to load this anymore. So let's delete this and save. And then in checkout.js at the top, we're going to use an import to import this function into our code. So we'll type import curly brackets. We'll import the function hello, and we're going to import it from a string. And then this time, instead of giving it a file path like before, we're going to give it a URL that contains our code. So on the web page, we're going to right click and copy the URL at the top, and then inside our code, in here, we're going to right click and paste. So this import works the same way as before, except now the code is coming from the internet rather than one of our files. So let's save, and then go back to our project, and check the console, and you can see that everything is still working. So that's how we use external libraries and JavaScript modules together. We just load the ESM version of the library, and we use import as normal, except this time we're importing from code that is on the internet. Next, let's use Day.js with JavaScript modules. To do that, we're going to load the ESM version of Day.js. So we're going to go to the video description and click this link for the Day.js ESM version. And now we're going to load this code into our project. So let's go back into our code. And first, let's open checkout.html. And we're going to remove the script tag, because we're going to load this with JavaScript modules. So let's save, and then go into checkout.js. And then at the top, we're going to import from the Day.js ESM version. So we'll import, and we're going to use a slightly different syntax. We're just going to type Day.js without the curly brackets. And then we'll type from a string, and we're going to give it the URL that contains the code. So we'll go to our browser, and then click the URL at the top. We're going to right click, copy, and then in our code, inside these quotes, right click and paste, and save. So now let's open our project and take a look at the console to make sure it works. So we'll right click, inspect the console, and everything is still working. So that's how we use the Day.js external library with JavaScript modules. So before we continue, we're going to learn about this new syntax that we used here. So this syntax is called a default export. A default export is another way of exporting something from a file. We can use it when we only want to export one thing from a file, and it makes the syntax a little bit cleaner because we don't have to type the curly brackets. So let's do an example of a default export to see how it works. We're going to open the utils folder and open money.js. And at the bottom, we're going to create a default export by typing export default, and then whatever we want to export. So let's say we want to export this function here. So we just type the name of the function, format currency, and save. And now when we import this, we can just import the name without the curly brackets. So the syntax is a little bit cleaner. Now each file can only have one default export. So if we only want to export one thing from a file, this is another syntax that we can use. So some people like using default exports because they feel that exporting only one thing from a file makes the code cleaner. However, in your own code, it's up to you which version of export you want to use. Let's go back to checkout.js. And then here, the day.js library only exports one thing, which is the day.js function. So they chose to use a default export instead of a normal export that we were using before. By the way, the syntax up here with the curly brackets is called a named export. So when we use external libraries in the future, some libraries will use named exports like this, and other libraries will use a default export like this. So it's useful to know both syntaxes. So that's how we use external libraries and JavaScript modules together. We just import from the ESM version of the library. Now keep in mind that not every library has an ESM version. So for some libraries, we still have to use a script tag. Okay, now that we learned external libraries, let's do some practical examples. We're going to go back to the checkout page, and we're going to use day.js to create the delivery options here. So the way this works is that we can select one of 3 delivery options. When we click an option, it should change the delivery date up here, and it should change the prices on the right side. So let's get started. As always, we're going to do 3 steps. First, we're going to save the data, and then we're going to generate the HTML. And finally, we're going to make it interactive. So first, what data do we need to save for this section? Well, each delivery option has a delivery time, like 7 days or 3 days. And each option also has a price. So right now, here's what our cart looks like. Now we could save the delivery option details inside the cart like this. However, notice that this data gets duplicated for each product in the cart. Instead, we're going to save the delivery options separately, and then just save an ID that points to the delivery option. As a reminder, this technique is called normalizing the data. We save the delivery options separately, and then we just save an ID that points to the full delivery option. So let's create the data for the delivery options. We'll go into our code, and then in the data folder, let's create a new file for this. And we're going to name this file delivery options.js and press enter. And in here, we'll create a list of delivery options that we can pick from. We'll create a variable const delivery options equals an array because we want a list. And then each delivery option is going to have multiple values, like the time to deliver as well as the price. So we're going to make each of them an object to group these values together. So I'm going to rearrange my windows here so that we can see the data that we're trying to save. And we can actually close these tabs for now. So here, let's save the data for the first delivery option. First, let's give it an ID property. Because as we mentioned, we're going to save the ID in the cart. And then we're going to use that ID to get the full delivery option here. So to keep things simple, let's just give it a string and an ID of 1. And then we're going to give it another property, and we're going to save the delivery time. So for the first option, it's going to take 7 days to deliver. So let's create a property, delivery days, colon, 7, and comma, and we're also going to save the price. So this one is free, so we're going to save the price, cents, and 0. Remember that a best practice when calculating money is to save it in cents. And next, let's save the data for the second delivery option here. We'll type a comma and another object, and let's give it an ID of 2 this time. And this one is going to take 3 days to deliver. So we'll type delivery days, colon 3, and we'll give it a price, cents, and this one is $4.99, so $4.99. And then finally, we're going to save the data for the third delivery option, comma, another object, ID of 3, and this one is going to take 1 day to deliver. So we'll type delivery days colon 1, comma, and the price cents is $9.99. The price cents $9.99, and save. So now that we've created our delivery options, for each product in the cart, we're going to save the ID of the delivery option that's selected. So for example, here, we selected the first option. We're going to save an ID of 1 in our cart. So let's go back into our code, and we're going to open the cart. So here, in the default cart, we're going to save the delivery option ID, colon, and let's say that the first product selected the first delivery option. So we're going to save the ID 1. And then for the second product, we're also going to save a delivery option ID, colon. And then let's say that for the second product, we chose the second delivery option here. So here, we're going to give it an ID of 2. Next, when we add a product to the cart, we also need to give it a delivery option ID. So if we scroll down to the add to cart function, here we're adding a product to the cart. So when we add a new product, we also want to give it a delivery option ID. So we'll type delivery option ID colon, and for new products, let's give it a default delivery option of 1. The cart quantity in the console. So let's type console.log every time, date at the top is equal to test it. So 7 and comma. We're going to save that cart. Add a new product. We also want to give it a delivery option ID. So we'll type delivery option ID colon. And for new products, let's give it a default delivery option of 1. So for new products, we'll select the first one. And now let's save. And lastly, we might have a cart that is saved in local storage. So we'll need to add the delivery option ID to local storage as well. But to keep things simple, let's just do a shortcut. We're going to delete the cart in local storage, and then it will go back to using this default value, which has the delivery option IDs. So to delete the cart from local storage, we're going to go into our page and open the console, right-click, inspect the console, and we're going to type local storage dot remove item, brackets, and the cart, and press enter. So this will erase the cart from local storage, and it will use those default values. So now let's go to our page and refresh, and it should be using the default cart. So that's how we save the data for the delivery options. By the way, in the rest of this course, if you get an error in your project, but your code looks correct, you may have some bad data saved in local storage. To fix this, you can try running localstorage.clear in your console to remove everything from local storage, and then refresh the page. The next step is to generate the HTML. First, let's find the HTML for the delivery options here. To do that, that to remove everything from local storage, and then refresh the page.
Why is it showing me 3? How is it getting 3? What if I just...
At those storage default value. Which has the delivery option IDs. So to delete the cart from local storage, we're going to go into our page and open the console, right-click, inspect the console. Now we're going to type local storage, then the delivery options here. To do that, we can right-click this part of the page and inspect, and this will give us the HTML for this part. So we're going to find the element that represents this part of the page, and that's this one right here. It's a div with a class delivery-options. And to find this in our code, we're going to search for this class. So let's go back to our code, and then we're going to open checkout.js, which is right here. And we'll press Control F or Command F to find code, and we're going to look for the class delivery-options. And it will give us this code right here. So this is the HTML for the delivery options. So now instead of writing this HTML directly, we're going to generate this with JavaScript. To keep our code organized, go back to our code, and then we're going to open checkout.js, which is right here. And we'll press Control F or Command F to find code, and we're going to look for the class delivery-options, and it will give us this code right here. So this is the HTML for the delivery options. So now instead of writing this HTML directly, we're going to generate this with JavaScript. To keep our code organized, let's create a function for generating this HTML. We'll scroll to the bottom, and then here, we'll create a function, and let's call it delivery options HTML, brackets and curly brackets. And now inside here, we're going to do 3 steps. First, we're going to loop through the delivery options we created earlier. And then for each option, we're going to generate some HTML. And then finally, we're going to combine all the HTML together. So first, let's import the delivery options at the top. So we'll scroll up, and we're going to import curly brackets from quotes, and we're going to locate the delivery options file, which is inside the data folder. So first we need to get out of the scripts folder. We'll type .. and then go into the data folder / delivery options.js. And we're going to import the delivery options. Now one thing I forgot to do is that inside these delivery options, we need to make sure that we export this variable. So we're going to type export and save. And we'll go back to checkout.js. And then here, we're going to loop through the delivery options below. So we'll scroll back down to this new function and type delivery options dot for each, brackets, and a function inside. And we'll name the parameter delivery option. So for each delivery option, we're going to generate some HTML. So let's use a template string to save the HTML. And then we're going to scroll up, and we're going to find the class delivery-option. So this is the HTML for one delivery option. So we're just going to copy this HTML into our JavaScript below. So we'll right-click, copy, and then down here, inside the string, give some new lines, and right-click, and this is the HTML for one delivery. Delivery option. So we're just going to copy this HTML into our JavaScript below. So we'll right-click, copy, and then down here, inside the string, give some new lines, and right-click, and paste. And if we need to reformat, new lines, and right-click, and paste. And if we need to reformat, we can select these lines and press Tab. Okay, now when we're generating the HTML, instead of using the same date every time, we're going to calculate the date using day.js and then insert it into here. To calculate the date, we're going to get today's date first using day.js. So up here, let's create a variable const today equals, and according to the documentation, to get today's date, we can just call the day.js function. So we'll type day.js and brackets. Next, each delivery option takes a certain amount of days to deliver. So we need to add that to today's date. To do that, we have a method called .add. So below this, let's create a variable to save the result. Const delivery date equals today.add brackets. And we're going to give it two parameters. The first parameter is how many days we want to add. And this is saved in the delivery option. So here, we'll give it the delivery option dot delivery days, comma, and then we'll give it the length of time we want to add, which is a string days. Now that we calculated the correct delivery date, we need to display it in an easy-to-read format. And again, day.js has a method called format that lets us do this. So below, let's create a variable const, and we'll call it date string, and make it equal to delivery date dot format brackets, and we'll give it a string. So the format we want is we want to insert the day of the week. So according to the documentation, we can use 4 Ds, and then a comma, and a space, and then we want to insert the month. And according to the documentation, that's 4 capital M's. And finally, we're going to insert the day of month, which is capital D. So now that we calculated this date string, we're going to insert it into the HTML instead of using the same date every time. So we'll remove this and then insert the date string. Next, let's insert the price because it's going to be different prices. Every time. So at the top, let's create a variable const, and we'll call it price. equals. And remember, each delivery option has a property price sense. So if the price sense is 0, we want to display the text free. If the price sense is not 0, we want to display the price as dollars with a dash. So to do that, let's practice using a ternary operator. So first, we'll check if the price sense is 0. So
What? We already have this.
type delivery option dot price sense is triple equals to 0. And then we'll type a new line and question mark, and also a new line and colon. So remember, the way that a ternary operator works is that if the first part returns true, the value is whatever's after this question mark. If the first part is false, then the value is whatever's after the colon. So it's sort of like an if statement, except we can save the result in a variable. So if the price sense is 0, that means it's free. So we want to display the text free. So we'll create a string free. And if the price sense is not 0, we want to display the price as dollars. So here, we're going to type a template string, a $sign, and we're going to insert the price sense as dollars. So here we'll type delivery option dot price sense. And to display this as dollars, we already have a function for this called format currency. So at the front, we're just going to type format currency, open bracket, and close bracket. And then at the end, let's add a dash.
Okay, so I need this to display as
So here we'll add space and dash and semicolon. So that's how we create the price string for each. Delivery option. So now let's substitute this into the HTML. So we'll remove this. And substitute the price string. And save. So now, instead of using the same values every time, we're substituting the values into the HTML. Finally, let's combine all this HTML together. So we're going to scroll up to the top, and outside of this loop, we're going to create a variable to save the result. So let HTML equals empty string to start, and then every time we loop through, we're going to add this HTML to this result. So here, we're going to type HTML plus equals. And finally, after we've created this HTML, we're going to return it from this function. So at the bottom, we're just going to return the HTML and save. Now that we generated the HTML for the delivery options, let's insert this into the HTML above. So instead of creating this HTML directly, we're going to delete it.
So this is from here to I think it's this. Yep. Let me just
and then here, we're going to insert, and we're going to run this function to generate it. So here, we're going to type delivery options HTML and brackets. Now, before we save, one thing that we're missing in this function is that if we scroll down, here we're using a variable called matching product. But this variable is not accessible inside this function. So let's actually pass the matching product in to here. Now, before we save, one thing that we're missing in this function is that if we scroll down, here we're using a variable called matching product. But this variable is not accessible inside this function. So let's actually pass the matching product into here. So at the top, we're going to add a parameter, matching product. And then when we call this function up here, we're going to pass in the matching product. So matching product. So now let's save and check our page. And now we're generating the HTML for these delivery options. And you'll notice that your delivery dates here will be based on today's date, or when you're watching this video. So this will be 7 days after today, or 7 days after when you're watching this video. This will be 3 days after today, or 3 days after when you're watching this video, and this will be 1 day after today. Now, one thing we need to fix here is that these selectors are empty. However, we want the delivery option that is saved in the cart to be checked. To do that, let's go back to our code. And in order to make one of these selectors selected, we're going to scroll down to the input element, and we're going to add an attribute called checked. And this attribute makes a selector checked. However, we don't want all of these delivery options to be checked. We only want it to be checked if it matches the delivery option ID that is saved in the cart. So let's write some code up here to figure out which delivery option should be checked. We're going to create a variable const to be checked if it matches the delivery option ID that is saved in the cart. So let's write some code up here to figure out which delivery option should be checked. We're going to create a variable const is checked equals, and we only want it to be checked if this delivery option's ID matches the delivery option ID in the cart. So we'll test if delivery option.id is equal to the cart items.delivery option ID. Now inside this function, we actually don't have access to cart item. So let's actually pass it in as a parameter. Cart item up here, and then when we call the function, this outer function has access to the cart item. So we're going to give it the cart item. So we're going to put it into this function, and then we can use it down here. So now that we have this variable, instead of being checked all the time, we're going to remove it.
If the delivery option dot ID, which is this, if the delivery option ID is equal to the cart item, delivery option
This and insert, and we're going to use a ternary operator here. Is checked, question mark, and colon. So we can also use a ternary operator when we're inserting into a string. So again, if this is true, it's going to get the value after the question mark. So if it is checked, we're going to give it the value checked. If this is false, we're going to give it the value of empty string. So it's the same thing as if this attribute didn't exist. So now if we save, you'll notice that the correct delivery option is checked for each product. The first product, we saved delivery option 1, and the second product, we saved delivery option 2. Finally, let's replace this date at the top with the delivery date that we selected here. We'll go back to our code, and we'll scroll to the top until we see this date in our code here. So now we're going to calculate this date using the delivery option that we picked. So remember that inside the cart, we only saved the delivery option ID. So let's use this to get the full delivery option. So at the top here, let's get the delivery option ID out of the cart. Const delivery option ID equals cart item dot delivery option ID. Next, we're going to use this ID to find the full delivery option. Now we did something similar with the product ID. We looped through the products, found a matching ID, and then saved it in a variable up here. So we'll do the same thing. Let's create a variable to store the result. Let delivery option, and then we're going to loop through the delivery options. So delivery options dot for each brackets and a function, and let's name the parameter option. Because we use the name delivery option up here. So in here, we're going to look for a matching ID. So if this option.id is equal to the delivery option ID here, we're going to save this inside this variable. So delivery option equals option. So now we have the full delivery option in our code, and we can use it to get the delivery days property and then calculate the day that we need here. To calculate this date, we already wrote some code for this at the bottom. If we scroll down in our code, when we wrote some code for this at the bottom. If we scroll down in our code, when we created the delivery options, we calculated the date for each delivery option. So we can reuse this code above. So let's select this code, and then right-click, copy, code above. So let's select this code, and then right-click, copy, and then at the top, after we get the delivery option, we're just going to right-click and paste that code again. And if we need to, we can reformat by selecting these lines and press Shift-Tab. So this code will take the delivery option that we selected and calculate the delivery date that we need to show down here. And now, instead of using the same date every time, we're going to remove this and insert the date string that we created above. So date, string, and save. So now this date string up here will...
Why is he doing it this way? This isn't gonna change. Like, that's my point. We need to get this. Why don't we just pull this date string from the currently selected radio selector? That's what I'm so confused about. So every time I change this, I'll have to update it in the cart, and this will run all over again. instead of so basically what I'm thinking is that every time I change this, you see how the delivery date on top doesn't change, even though it says Wednesday, July 31st, it still says Sunday, August 4th. So what the tutorial is going to tell me to do now is every time I change this, the radio selector, it's going to ask me later to update the delivery ID. So if you look at this card, it's gonna every time I change this, imagine I change this to Monday, it's gonna ask me to update it here to delivery option ID 3 or whatever. But I'm saying, why even do that? Just take this locally on the web page, right? And every time I change it, it just changes up here. And then once I click place your order, then pull the data, which option ID it's on. So I can mess around with as much as I want here, and it won't make a difference. To the cart, it'll just like show it here, and then as soon as I click place your order, then it pushes all this data into the cart or wherever like the order is being sent. Anyway,
will match the delivery date that we chose on the right side. So that's how we generate the HTML for the delivery options
so
using
stupid.
the Day.js external
I'm
library.
stupid, I don't know.
So now let's take a look at our changes in Git.
Okay. Let's sit down for this one.
We'll go to our code and open the Git section.
And like, this is so messy. I don't know what anything's doing. This needs to be a function. Oh, he's putting everything in the scope of one function, which is really confusing me. So, delivery options is the array. Yeah, that's what I was saying. Yeah, that's what
And here, it'll tell us in cart.js, we added delivery option IDs to the cart, as well as when we add to the cart. And then in this file, we create the list of delivery options. And in checkout.js, instead of writing this HTML directly, we generated it. And then in money.js, we learned about default exports. So let's type a message to describe our changes. Save, data, and.
What changes did I make? This is just some next one. Look, it's like a one-line change. Nothing actually got changed. I'm just gonna revert this. Yeah, that's okay.
And generate HTML.
Jesus, like I can't imagine, like I'm not able to comprehend like 5 different things I do. This code needs to be like neater. This code needs to be so much neater because I'm just not able to like comprehend.
For delivery options and commit.
Holy shit. He's gonna ask
The
us
last
to do all
step
the
is to make it
cleaning.
interactive. So when we click a delivery option,
Yeah, that's what
we need to do two things. First, we need to update the delivery option ID in the cart array.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
And-
So he's saying that once we click the delivery options, we have to update this in the cart, so that we need to update this in the cart so that where's checkout.js? We don't need the CSS for right now. We need to update this in the cart so that all of this loads again. All of this. Holy shit, I need to like let cart summary HTML. Where is it? throwing it onto. Let me get rid of this shit. So, document or query selector in the inner HTML, the cards on the HTML. Okay, I can close this for now. I need to make functions for these because, so this is just, this whole thing needs to be one line, which is get delivery date for header, and then this just needs to be, this is still fine, let matching product. This is for each card. We need to run this. Get let matching product. Cons product ID is a column product for each product. We want to see if the product's ID is equal to the product ID we pull from the card item, and the matching product is equal to product. And that's how we got like the image ID. Okay, that's fine. We already have today as like, I don't think we need all this. This was just like to test stuff out. Okay.
Number 2, we need to update the page. So we need to update this date here to match the date that we select. Let's start with the first step. Let's create a function for updating the delivery option in the cart. We're going to go to our code, and we're going to open the file called cart.js. So because we're modifying the cart, a best practice is to put the code inside this file. This file should contain all the code that manages the cart. So we're going to scroll down to the bottom, and we're going to add a new function. So let's type function, and let's name it update delivery option, brackets and curly brackets. So when we update a delivery option, we need to know the product that we want to update, as well as the delivery option that we chose. So we're going to need two things for this function: the product ID and the delivery option ID. So the steps to do this is, first we're going to loop through the cart and find the product, and then we're going to update the delivery option ID of that product. So to find the product using the product ID, we already have some code for this. If we scroll up to the add to cart function, we have this code which takes the product ID and finds it.
Yeah, there we go. That's actually pretty smart. So we should make this also. When you find this, I'm just gonna call this find matching item. There's so much like reused code here that just needs to be put in a function. And then if matching item, you can just return a boolean. Matching item is equal to 5. That's, we gotta return like matching item the whole way. That's pretty sure. I'm just gonna get rid of this and simple. That's pretty sure. Oh yeah, I made a mistake. Oops. This is the code, I believe. I'm just gonna. This is
the matching product in the cart. So let's just make a copy of this code. We're going to select it, right click copy, and then paste it into our new function.
if product ID is equal for each item in the cart, we see the matching item is equal to the item, right? And then so this loop runs through here, and once we get the matching item, right? So if matching item, then what we want to do is we want to make the matching item dot delivery option ID is equal to the delivery option ID that we pass here. And then if that's equal, once we make that, we just need to save the storage. This, I'm gonna rename this later. That should work.
Down here,
Let me see what he does, even though I'm pretty sure this should work.
so this will give us the cart item that matches this product ID and save it in this variable. Next, each cart item has a property called delivery option ID. So we're just going to update that property. So down here, we can just type the code matching item dot delivery option ID and make it equal to the delivery option ID that we give to this function. Delivery option ID. And lastly, because we updated the cart, we should save it to local storage. So we can use this function we created earlier, save to storage, and brackets. Now let's save. Now that we have this function, let's use it on the checkout page. So first let's export it so we can use it.
So this is exported. So from cart.js, I want to import, what is this called? Update delivery option. Actually, let me make this I could just put a star here.
We need to add our code here, listener.js. And then in our project, we need to add event listeners to each of these delivery options. So we run some code when we click them. So inside our code here, we're going to scroll to the HTML for each delivery option, which is right here. And then we're going to add a class. So we can select it using the knob. JS dash.
Yeah, so we go to the delivery option.
Delivery dash option. And then we'll add an event listener to these. So we'll scroll down. And down here.
So the code that this guy's doing is very different from mine because I've added all like the extra functionality. So I need to close a lot of these so it doesn't get too messy. I'm gonna close this. VS Code is so nice, honestly. Functionality when delete button is called update cart quantity. And it just tells me. And then this is, what is this functionality? What does this do? Okay, so down here I want to do this document. So this doesn't go in the loop, right? This is new. I'm just gonna use this
We'll add the event listener using document.query selector all brackets.
Because I need to see which one it's on, so one click. We wanna run a function. Right, so we gonna do this.
A string. We'll select that class we just created using .js.
Oh wait, what am I doing? Oh.
S dash delivery dash option, and then a dot for each brackets and a function. So for each option, we're going to add an event listener and listen for clicks. So let's just call each of the options an element. So for each of these elements, we're going to element.add event listener brackets, and we're going to listen for clicks, comma, and we're going to run this function when we click it. So as we said, the first thing we'll do is to update the delivery option ID in the cart. So now let's import that function that we created earlier. We're going to scroll to the top, and we're already importing from the cart. So to import something else, we're going to add a comma, and we're going to import that function, update delivery option. So now let's scroll back down and use it in our code. So here, when we click a delivery option, we're going to update delivery option brackets. Now we said we need to give this function two things: the product ID that we want to update it for, as well as the delivery option ID that we picked. But how do we get these two values? And the answer is, if we scroll up, here we have access to the product ID, and we also have access to the delivery option ID. So we can use data attributes to attach it to this element here.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
So let's create a data attribute, data. Dash product dash ID equals double quotes, and insert the product ID, which is matching product dot ID. And we're also going to use a data attribute for the delivery option, data dash delivery dash option dash ID equals double quotes, and we're going to insert the delivery option here. So delivery option dot ID, and save. Next, let's go back down, and then here, we're going to get those values out of the data attributes by using const.
Yeah, so I think
Next, let's go back down, and then here, we're going to get those values out of the data attributes by using const, and let's use the shorthand property here for practice.
Let me add the event listener. We want to get the const product ID.
Curly brackets equals the element dot data set. And then out of the data attributes, we're going to get the product ID, comma, as well as the delivery option ID.
Oh, you can do that.
As a reminder, this is a shorthand property. It does the same thing as the code.
Ooh, I didn't know you could do that. So this needs to go then. And I mean, semicolon. Here we can do delivery option ID.
Down here, but it's just a. Now let's save and try out the project. We'll go back, and here, if we click the second delivery option and then refresh the page, you'll notice that now this one is checked and the date here is correct. So that's how we make this section interactive. We just update the cart, and then when we refresh the page, it will regenerate.
So that's my point. It works. He said click July 31st, then refresh the page. Okay, no, that didn't work.
Right. Let's save.
Okay, where's the error? Why does it do that?
Const add option, and then dot for each brackets and a listener delivery option. And then we want to update the and it's the same thing as and then refresh the page. You'll notice that now this.
So it's saving it to storage. Yeah, this is running. update delivery option. Let me just remove this line because it's not really necessary. That's each. For each item, if the product ID is equal to why is it loading this now? It's not updating. So if I click this, there you go. Cannot set properties of undefined. Oh shit. Matching animal. So, what is it saying? Why is this thing bugging out? Okay, so am I not able to pull this? Update delivery option, and I'm not trying to get delivery option. So let me try to refresh this. Let's see. Delivery. And then element of data set. This is probably where I made a mistake. It's here, right? Date, delivery. What is this? I don't know how I did this, but okay. Click inspect and look. Cannot set properties of undefined. I can't set undefined. Why is it undefined? Oh Jesus. Okay. Let's debug this.
One is check.
So let's ask Lord what this means. What does this mean? Oh. I think I know what's up.
Get equally to 3 to another. date. So for each here, and we're gonna find manages the cart, and let's name it as find the product in the add to cart product ID. We already have a copy of this code. We're gonna select it, right click, and then paste it into our new function. Down here, right click and paste.
Yeah, so we didn't find a matching item. Looks like we didn't find a matching item literally. Yep, so the matching item here is undefined. Why? Cart. So before I even run this, let me just see exactly where the problem is happening. See if it has access to the card, which it should. It has the card. Let's see what the product ID it's going to cost us. I'm gonna reload this actually. Let's dispose. And let's load this. Right, so it's telling me 3 is the number of things in the cart, and then if I click this, I forgot quotes. If I go down in checkout.js, sorry, here, where I give it the data, and this is where the data comes, and that's why this should literally work. And even though I still think this is stupid, yeah, that's fucking stupid. There you go. I forgot the quotes. I can remove these now. I don't know the console log to see the just So I want to write some and for this it updates. So I'm just asking Claude to do improvements. And this should be it. So just here we do this, and then you see it gives you. There we go. And now let's go to Git and function updates the card delivery option based on video selectors on checkout page. Oh, my cough. My cough is coming back. And it's like super annoying. Let's see if we get some interesting exercises.
So this will give us the cart item that matches this product ID and save it in this variable. Next, each cart item has a property called delivery option ID. So we're just going to update that property. So down here, we can just type the code matching to each of these three. So we can select it using the DOM. J, select product ID, attribute, get places on to on the side. At this, update the page. So now let's go back into our code. And then here. So let's go back into our code. And there's two things that I want to point out here. So notice that we set a type inside a function so we can rerun it. We need to refresh the page for the text to be updated. So what we're going to work on now is when we click this, we want the page to update immediately. So far in this course, the way we solve this problem is once we click this, we're going to use the DOM to get this element here and then update the text directly. However, the problem with this approach is that we need to update the page one by one. And later, there might be lots of places on the page that we need to update. For example, when we change a delivery option, we also need to change the numbers here on the right. So there's potentially a lot of things that we need to update one by one, and it's easy to make a mistake or forget something. So now we're going to learn a better way to update the page. We'll go back to our code. And let's open checkout.js again. And notice, if we scroll up, here, we already have all of this code that takes our data and generates the HTML. So another way to update the page is after we update our data, we just need to rerun all this code and regenerate all this HTML. So let's give this a try. First, we're going to put all of this code inside a function so we can rerun it. We're going to scroll to the top, and let's put this in a function by typing function, and let's call it render order summer. Right.
Okay.
Brackets and curly brackets. So the word render just means to display on the page. And we're going to call this section the order summary. So this function should display the order summary on the page. Next, we're going to put all of this code inside our new function. So let's just remove this curly bracket here. And let's actually select all of this code, and we're just going to reformat it by pressing tab. Tab and adding an indent. And then at the end, we're going to add back that closed curly bracket.
All of this code goes in the function, so that's what I said. We need to pretty much reload the whole page. Which I think is very efficient, but I mean, okay. This does everything right so far. So.
To finish the function. So all we did was we put all of our code inside a function. And then at the bottom, let's run this function, because we still need to run all this code at the start of our page. So we're going to type render the order summary and brackets. So this shouldn't change anything because we're just running the same code, but now it's just...
let me see if this works actually, because I haven't opened up the one side. Oops, that's the wrong one. I need to run this. So, should give me a live yeah. So
it's in a function. Let's save and check. And everything's still working, so that's good. So now let's go back into our code. And this time, to update the page, instead of using the DOM to update the page directly, like we did up here, we're just going to rerun all of this code and regenerate all the HTML. So after we update the data, we're going to rerun the code using render order summary and brackets. Now let's save and try it out. So here,
that's insane. So we're gonna reload the whole page for that.
okay, let's say we start off with the first delivery option. If we click the third delivery option, you'll notice that the date up here updates automatically. If we click the second delivery option, it updates automatically as well. So that's a better way to keep the page up to date. Instead of using the DOM and changing the HTML directly one by one, we just update the data and then regenerate all of this HTML. So let's go back into our code, and there's two things that I want to point out here. So notice that we put our event listeners into this big function. And that's because when we're regenerating all the HTML, we're essentially deleting the previous HTML and replacing it. So we need to add the event listeners again. And the second thing I want to point out is that inside the render order summary function, we can call render order summary again. So a function can actually call itself or rerun itself. And this feature is called recursion. It's useful when a function needs to rerun all of its code. So now let's save our changes into Git. We'll open the Git section, and it will tell us in checkout.js, we basically moved all of our code into this function. And then at the bottom, we call the function at the start of the page, and we also call the function when we select a delivery option. So now let's add a message describing our changes, regenerate HTML when updating delivery option, and commit. So the technique we just used, where we update the data and then regenerate all the HTML, this technique is called MVC. MVC stands for Model View Controlling, and it's a popular technique in software engineering. In MVC, we split our code into 3 parts. The first part is the model. This is all the code that saves and manages the data. So in our project, all the code in this data folder is called the model, because this code saves and manages our data. The second part of MVC is the view. This is code that takes the data and displays it on the page. So in our project, if we open checkout.js and scroll to the top, here we have code that takes our data and then generates all the HTML. So this code is called the view. The last part of MVC is the controlling. So this runs some code when we interact with the page. So in our project, at the bottom, these event listeners here would be called the controlling, because they do something when we interact with the page or with the view. So in MVC, we divide our code into these 3 parts, and then they interact with each other in a loop. First, we use the model to generate the view. So in our code, that's what we did here. We took the model, or the data, which is our cart, and then we generated the HTML, or the view. Then, when we interact with the view, it will run the controller. So that's what we did at the bottom here. When we interact with the page, we run some code. And finally, we use the updated model to regenerate the view. So we use MVC, JavaScript, MVC. We're gonna open our project again to the checkout page, and we're gonna create this payment section on the right. Now, before we start, if we look...
I'm gonna take a break. I will be back in a while. It's been a 2-hour stream, so